all about writing with Ben and Sara.
Welcome to All About Writing, the podcast that covers everything about the world of writing from the inside out. This is episode 75, part 10 on our series on screenwriting. I'm Sara, here with my co-host Ben, who is an award-winning, best-selling author and ghostwriter, editor, and publisher.
And I'm Ben, here with my co-host Sara, who is an award-winning, best-selling author, screenwriter, editor, and TED Talk presenter. And today, we're talking about something which might be a bit of a surprise to authors who are thinking about writing screenplays. And that is that you have to work as part of a team when you're writing screenplays. And this is different because as an author, we pretty much work alone. You know, if we're writing our book, if I'm writing my book, as an author, I get to make all the decisions. I have complete control of the creative vision. And even if we work with an editor, the editor is still subordinate to us. We as the author still have final say. I remember one friend of mine, when she got her book back from an editor at a big New York publishing company, and she learned that she was allowed to write "stet" when she didn't want the change the editor suggested to be made. "Stet" meant that it was to stay the way she wanted it. And so she typed, and she described it as "stet," she typed, "drunk with power." And she just loved the fact that as an author, she still had the ability to overrule an editor. So as an author, we're kind of used to being in charge and being able to make all the decisions. But that is not the way it works with screenplays. So I'm going to hand this over to Sara, who has more experience than I do writing screenplays and can tell us all about what it's really like.
Well, so the biggest thing I like to say about screenplay writing is that you may write the first draft by yourself. You may write a couple of drafts by yourself. That's probably the only time you're going to have alone. And then very quickly you will start getting co-writers. Even if they don't get the IMDb credit, even if you are even if they're getting paid to help you, they won't necessarily get that screenwriting credit, but their fingers are going to be in that screenplay. Now, other times, that's why you might see screenplay by, 6 writers. And it's because they negotiated, like, fine, I won't get paid to help create this screenplay or clean it up or edit it, but instead I want points. I want my name on the screenplay, and I want the IMDb credit for it and payment, later. So but you go very quickly from having a baby to having a lot of co-writers that a lot of people might not even know about, and that's for a film. So a film is different than a TV show. Writing a script for a TV show, because that's done in a writer's room, which I think we've talked about a little bit in the past with TV writing. That's where it's totally collaborative. There's a room, it can be anywhere from a mini room of 5 to 8 people to a room of 20 people, and everybody's building a script. And even if you're in charge of kind of writing that first draft, it goes back to the group and ripped apart. And so it is not a, what did you say it was? It's screenwriting in general will never be solitary in the end. It's just impossible. Even the director will come in and make notes, and
Well,
they're not
that's
a
it.
writer.
Exactly, yeah, because we have to remember too, unlike a book, which is a product which consists of words, it's like a written product. A film or a TV show is something much bigger. It's a visual product, and so as the writer, even if you were able to control that script, like say you're a very powerful writer and you can have this ability to influence and keep it basically your vision, then you have to hand it to the director. And then you have to give it to the actors. And of course, they are artists in their own way who bring their own talent. And so, even though even the casting people, right? Like, well, I imagined the character looking like this. Well, the actor they hired doesn't look like that. And
Correct.
so, I mean, again, Sarah, you have more experience here, but like it's just such a collaborative effort to create a film product.
Yeah, you really, the only time you're going to get a writer who is able to write something and see very little changes, whether that's TV or that is film, is one if they're established. They've spent decades in the industry. They're on the they're famous. They're a famous writer, or they're a writer director. And then usually they're also a producer. And those are again your huge names. So unless you are the creme of the creme A-list writer director, you're not going to be able to walk something from start to finish. And yeah, you're right. I mean, the director comes in, the director's going to have ideas. I've worked, in the past, certain scripts that have been kind of almost set in stone, winning tons of awards, and the director comes in and is like, can you like write just one specific scene? I just want it visually on the page so we know to shoot it. And it's not like changing things, but it's still yet another like version of the screenplay that has somebody else's creative stamp on it, even though the director will never get, a screenplay credit for it. They're putting in their notes. And for the most part, most actors will read what's on the page, but it's the inflection that will create, and where they choose to pause in whatever you've written that gives it life. But also it's very weird because we have audiobooks. We read our books. The audiobook artist will, if they're good, they do their voices and they do their own inflections and they do all of that stuff. But it's one thing to just hear somebody doing that. It's another thing to just have somebody take what you've written and make true art out of it. And that's where again, you lose a lot. And you're writing on set. You're realizing as you're shooting stuff that a line that you've had or a couple of lines just do not work even after a table read, and then
Yeah.
you're in the middle of production and you're like, this is not working at all, which is why there's always a writer from the writer's room on set on TV shows, because they have to make sure that there's continuity from what's going to be happening in future episodes of the season. And so they're there. So like if there's those last minute changes, they can be like, yeah, that works, or no. And you have to, and you have this, you usually have the screenwriter, if the budget allows, on set for films for the same reason. Because the director, if they're not a writing director, they're going to be like, this is just not working. Like, we need to come up with something else for these guys to memorize and say kind of on the fly. And they turn to the screenwriter and the main screenwriter and be like, fix this like now.
Hmm.
And you have to change your script on the fly. And that's not when you can be like, no, I love it. It's perfect the way it is. You're still collaborating even on that level.
Yeah. And it's such an important thing to realize because, again, as a book author, you are all those things, right? You are the writer, you are the director, you are the editor, you are the actors because you can hear it, you build the dialogue the way you think it is. But as soon as you're writing for film, you are not. And you are a collaborator. You are just one of many. And it is a very rare instance, I think, where the writer is sort of the driving force here. The writer creates the thing, but it's the director or perhaps the actor, if they're a particularly, famous, influential actor, who is kind of running the show at that point. You, as the writer, even though you are the one who physically created the story that everyone's working from, you are not the one, you're not the principal anymore. You just sort of gave them the first draft and here you go, do with it as you will.
Well, and this is something I think a lot of people don't realize unless they're in the industry. There's one more person that weighs in, two more people, but they kind of go hand in hand very early in the process. And the first one that weighs in is the producer, because the producer will look at your script and go, we don't have money for a mountain lion trainer. And you need to rewrite that whole scene. Like, and even if it's like some pivotal character building thing, like come up with something cheaper. Like, or this,
Yep.
okay, you have 4 children. Well, children actors are too expensive and we can only shoot them so many days. So like take out take out 2 of the kids because we just don't have the money for that. And
Yeah.
in tandem with that is the line producer, which is different than the overarching producer who's going to kind of read from like a macro level on costs. Like you'll get them and they'll be like, we can make this episode really cheap if we hear horses, but we never see horses. Like because of the cost. And then you get the line producer, and the line producer is down in the absolute weeds of the script. And they're going to come to you and just be like, "Can we like combine like 4 of these characters into one talking role? It's so much cheaper." And you have to like go through and be like, "I guess I can." And you're rewriting like the whole thing because you're deleting 3 characters and making all those talking points to one because it takes 3 more people and all of their fringes and all of their benefits and all of their insurance off the budget, and because they're trying to come to budget. And so there's just a whole different like um there's a whole different aspect. And so you're going back and forth with the line producer on writing your script because
Mm.
they have feedback that comes down to the bottom line. And
Yeah.
and that's what a lot of people don't realize either. I mean, we talk about directors and we talk about, kind of those people, but then there are the people on the crew who are going to have way more say than a lot of people realize in how that script finalizes based on that budget when it gets like down to like we need to find $10,000 and here's where we can find it, rewrite the script this
Yeah.
way.
I mean, I've always said there's a reason why I write military sci-fi books and not military sci-fi screenplays. Because the budget required to create my vision, would put Avatar to shame. So it's way cheaper to just write it in a book. So that is
Yeah.
true. It's good to remember that. I'd forgotten. I do remember working on a screenplay, and it was still fairly early days. And yeah, it must have been the producer came back to us and said, "Yeah, you guys added a scene here, which is like in a big hangar with like 1,000 people in it. Yeah, we're not doing that. Like we are just not doing that. So rewrite that scene and put it somewhere else where we already have a set. Like we're not going to build a whole set just for this one like 60-second, 30-second scene. Like, I see what you're doing there. Okay, yes. And cutting down on the number of, like, if you're in a ship's crew, because I write military sci-fi, you don't have to have every single person on the bridge say something, because every time an actor speaks, you have to pay them more because now they have a speaking role as opposed to
Mhm.
just an extra in the background. So you have to like minimize who speaks. And I know it's not realistic in a military point of view, but it's a lot cheaper. So make it happen. So yeah, of course. That's yes, it's very true. It's
Yeah.
very true.
Yeah. And as you get more time writing screenplays, you'll learn to uh you'll know the questions that are going to be asked. And so you might even be able to, as you write, self-edit
Mm.
because you have advanced knowledge of the eyebrows you're going to get. And so there are times when I catch myself writing to budget, and I have a screenwriting, I have several screenwriting partners, but one's always like, we're just going to write what we want to write first. We can always go back and we can always start to think about cost. But first draft, don't worry about budget because all of a sudden you start putting yourself more and more and more in a box when you're writing, and
Mhm.
you kind of can hurt yourself that way. So when writing a screenplay, as you get further along and you start to have conversations with producers and things like that, don't that I wanted to pass on because it is good advice. Don't write to budget first. Write
Mhm.
the story first and write the plot, and don't put that airplane hangar with thousands of people in it, right? But understand that you will be working collaboratively with a lot of people. I have a really good friend. She's an executive producer. She's been nominated for Oscars. Like, she's a thing. And she, even though she knows story and she can take a script and build it, she won't do that alone either. So there's the main screenwriter. They bring her in. She'll bring other people in. And even if the main screenwriter isn't totally involved in that process, there's 1 to 4 people adding in, support to that script, even if it's not collaborative in the way we talk about collaborative, but there's still people putting their prints on that script to try and make it the best it can be before it even goes through the is this affordable stage.
And I think it's really important to emphasize here that this is not a bad thing. Writing screenplays is different from writing books in that it's collaborative, but that's great. You have all these other genius creatives who are going to be contributing to this. You can learn from them. You can bounce ideas off them. It can be a really fun process. And I know coming into this, I was thinking, I know a lot of authors, and a lot of authors don't even like to deal with editors because they don't like someone messing with their stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, you should not write screenplays then. But for someone who is interested in writing screenplays, just go into it knowing that you're going to be working with a lot of people, that your original vision is going to be changed by the time it gets on film. And it's not going to be something that you're necessarily even going to be consulted on. You might be, but probably not. Certainly not.
You won't be. The only way, like I said, is like if you have been chosen out of the writers, like the showrunner has sent you out of everybody else in the writer's room to go sit on set for continuity's sake. And then they will consult you, but it will be mostly for that reason, not because you're rewriting stuff. And I think that I'm glad that we're talking about this because there's so many pieces in it, and it isn't a bad thing. And you're going to get notes the whole time you're working on a screenplay. I think it's just another lesson to reiterate what we've talked about so much in the past, whether you're working with co-writers or editors or in screenplay, right? The screen world, getting rid of your ego and being aware and willing to take notes, to take criticism, to take adjustments is the only way forward. And this is just yet another example of that mantra in the industry. If you want to be successful, you have to be open to, you can't be precious about your work because it will only hurt you, and you will not see the career takeoff that you were hoping for.
And just remember, everyone, that as writers, we bring a certain talent to this project. But the directors and the editors and the actors and the set designers and the makeup artists, they all bring their talent as well. And we are just part of that.
Yep.
And I think that's the attitude to go in with.
Absolutely. Well, that's our show for today, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our chats, and feel free to leave a review, which really helps us a lot. Don't forget to find Ben at ben@rcoles.com, as well as on Facebook and on Instagram.
And you can catch up with Sara at saradahman.com and on Instagram. Thanks for joining us today. Please reach out if there are any topics you'd like us to cover, and we'll see you again when we next chat all about writing.
This has been All About Writing with Ben and Sara.